Good afternoon, everyone. We are here for our Thai webinar on building high-performance teams. My name is Arun Pestrija. I'm going to be moderating this discussion today. I am a member of the Thai Houston board, as well as one of the past presidents, and personally, I manage a business for providing billing solutions for telecom providers and building fiber networks and IT services. So the topic is of immense interest to me as well. And before we get started, so let me kind of give you a little background on Thai. Some of you certainly are very well aware of Thai. Some of you may be new. Thai was, it's actually original was standing for the Indus Entrepreneur, was founded in early 90s in Silicon Valley by a group of successful entrepreneurs, executives, and professionals with the intent of really helping the next generation of entrepreneurship with, the key foundations being mentoring, networking, and education. It's a global organization over last 25 plus years. We are now 15,000 members across 61 chapters in 14 countries. Houston has a very vibrant Thai organization. And the backbone of this organization is what we call charter members. So we have 3,000 of those across the world. And these are folks who are successful entrepreneurs, successful corporate executives who want to give back, with their time, their mentorship, sharing their lessons learned. And you're getting one of those today. I mean, Somesh absolutely fits that bill, and he'll be sharing his thoughts on the topic today. Before we get onto the topic, I do want to recognize our sponsors. You see that on the slide. Without their support and help, no nonprofit really can be successful. So you see, our platinum sponsors: Apex, Houston Angel Network, Unica Ventures, our corporate sponsors, Songkran Restaurant, our educational partners, Houston Community College, and our gold sponsors, Annexus Consulting and Elon. So thank you, and Saudi Aramco Energy Ventures as well. So thank you for all our sponsors. So moving on to the topic today, teams. As we are transitioning over the last 40 plus years from an industrial economy where command and control was sort of the modus operandi for management and the members, to a knowledge-based economy, where the teams and the diversity of teams and how they work together to achieve results has been so critical. This topic has been studied for the last several decades. There's been a lot written on it. There's never, ever a week I've seen where one of those teams' book is not on the bestseller list in New York Times on top 10. You got both sides. I mean, you got things like the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Patrick Leoncini, you've probably heard that. It talks about what doesn't work. But then on the other side, which is the topic of interest today, is what works. So, how do you build a high performance team, which is the key matter. So for that, we're delighted to have our own Somesh, who's going to be talking about that. A quick background on Somesh. He's got the absolutely perfect educational pedigree. Engineer from IIT, which is one of the premier institutes of India, master's from Columbia, and an MBA from Wharton. Although his technical degrees were in chemical engineering, he did end up spending 30 years in software industry. So he'll explain to us how he made that transition from being a chemical guy to software. And that includes including executive ranks at IBM, BMC Software, Attachmate, Vignette, Paradigm Geophysical, and most recently Emerson Electric, where he is now just recently retired and ready to take on next phase of his life of maybe still going to be involved like he is with I, but maybe get to do some more fun things. He actually also had venture background in terms of starting a company. He was one of the early ones to do an IoT and SaaS model in late 90s, where we did a software to deliver connected devices and asset management solutions. Fair amount of M&A experience, both on the buy side and sell side, as part of his different places he worked as executive. And he's also very active with the community and the local nonprofit, DIE being one, also for helping serve underprivileged children's education, as well as Houston Commerce with the Chamber of Commerce. He's been very active with that. And while he's not busy doing all these things, he enjoys hiking and biking and some mountain climbing. So with that, we're delighted to have Sumesh here. So I will pass the baton to Sumesh, and he's going to tell us about how to build a high-performance team. Sumesh.
Thank you, Arun. That was quite comprehensive introduction. Thank you very much. Delighted to be here. Let me start to share my screen. I've got a slide deck that would help us walk through this, and at the end of the presentation, we'll open it up for questions and answers.
And Sumesh, while you do that, let me we'll just as a house rule. So Sumesh will go through a presentation. As you are listening, feel free to pose your questions on the chat, and then I will try to compile those, and we will then we will leave at least 15 to 20 minutes towards the end of the session for Q&A. So back to you, Sumesh.
Can I start now?
Yes, please. Go ahead, please.
All right. So although here picture is of football, we're not going to be talking about sports, but I thought this was a good analogy for building a high-performance team. If we were to ask any CEO about what makes their company different from their competitors, sooner or later, I'm sure they're going to come to a common denominator. Most of them would start to talk about people. They're likely to say that they invest a lot of time in finding the best and most talented people who are passionate about customers, who are passionate about their industry, or who are passionate about the technology that their team is working on. They're also likely to say that their culture of can-do attitude and bias towards action makes the big difference and makes them different from their competitors. All that is true, but we also know that in spite of all that, some companies succeed, some don't, especially smaller companies, startups. Most startups fail. Some make to the stage where they start to become significant, but cannot make the transition into a larger company, a scalable company. So there is some difference here. So CEOs are right to believe that the quality of people is probably the most important thing for success in their organization. But there is something more than just individual employees or individual associates' excellence that makes one team more successful than others. So in the next about 30 to 35 minutes, we will together explore what are the factors that make a team highly performant versus one that falls short of the objectives. Here's a quote by R. Meredith Belbin. He's a UK-based management consultant, and he's attributed as having said, "Do you want a collection of brilliant minds or a brilliant collection of minds?" This quote beautifully encapsulates the idea that a sum of the parts is greater than the whole. So a brilliant collection of mind, also known as high-performance team, is something that everybody strives for, but it's very hard for people to put their head around and say, what does it actually mean? A high-performance team produces superior results consistently. The team is innovative in problem solving, and they're agile in their approach. And they're agile in their approach because they have clarity of big picture objective, and they have confidence that they have the ability to solve problem, and they have authority to make those solutions stick. And they are scalable. they're scalable because the skills that are required to be a high performance computing are skills not specific to a specific project, but they are portable to all kinds of different projects. And once that skill becomes part of a particular organization, those skills can be ported to various problem solving situations. The leaders and CEOs and other executives, those who are thoughtful and watching this, and if they nurture these specific traits, they could really drive a big transformational change in their organization. And all of that is, of course, it creates an environment for self-learning and governing. In the times of crisis, we have all seen, especially in smaller organizations, there is command and control kind of approaches taken to solve problems. That works in some areas sometimes, and it fails in other situations. Even in large companies where autocratic executives are involved, you will see this command and control tops-down approach. And as I said, in some cases they succeed, but in many cases they don't. In larger companies, most of the time it is team approach is what is taken. And we have all seen that task forces are spun up, they start to do work, some produce results that are expected or that are asked of, but others over time, they start to become dysfunctional and become a source for resource waste, and over time, they start to peter off. So what is it that makes one team successful and other not? There are three basic forces that combine together to create environments where teams can be successful or not successful. So let's take a look at it together. The first one is power. You can also define power as authority. What this means is that the individuals involved in the team have power or authority, and this power or authority is vested in them by organization, either because of their expertise or their position in the organization. I think I want to spend a couple more seconds on this, a few more minutes on this actually, because often you hear people say the power means somebody who can say yes or no for a decision or to a project, approve a project or decline a project. Turns out in most organizations, a lot more people have authority or they have power to say no than they have power to say yes. Let me give you a simple example. In a case of hiring process, hiring manager selects a employee who he or she feels is appropriate for the open position. But turns out that HR representative or one of the peer managers says something negative or something doubtful about this employee, and that results in putting the employee back in the list, and decision is made to continue looking for other employees. Situations like these happen often in organizations where many more people can say no or put a stop to a project, but very few have the full authority to say, go ahead. So when I talk about power here and authority, is power to say yes as well as no, but a lot more important is the power to say yes than to no. The second force is ability. And this is very clearly what this means is that the ability of the individual to actually have actually solve that problem or have some expertise in the problem that is being discussed, whether it is a problem for planning for future strategy or some existing tactical problem, but ability has to be an important factor here. And the third is influence. And this one is a very tricky one, because what this is about, people who may not have direct ability to solve problem or authority, but enough connections in the organization or enough respect from other areas that their voice goes a long way in influencing opinion in the organization. This is a particularly interesting force because most senior executives or managers, when they go to a new organization, it is important for them to try to figure out where are these influence centers. Because if one understands the influential people in the organization, influential individuals, then one can work with them. If one does not understand that, then it is possibility of being blindsided is very high. And if one pays too much attention to it, it could also clog up the decision process and completely take the power away from the manager. So these three, I wanted to put this on a slide because later on we're going to talk, as we go to the next slide, we'll talk about how the interaction between these three forces really create an environment that creates a unique and different dynamics. So high performance happens when power, ability, and influence come together. But as I said before, that these three forces, power, ability, and influence, they are not distinct and separate. There's significant overlap between them. And when they overlap, they create unique environments and unique dynamics that the manager should be aware of, so they could identify it and keep that in mind as they build teams. So let's just look at the first one. When power and ability comes together, this I call the zone of agility. Essentially, what this means is that the team has authority as well as ability to solve the problem. And that is a powerful, that's a very strong and excellent environment for a small team to very quickly attack the problems, define the problems, attack the problems, and implement it. But this is not scalable because as size of the team grows larger and larger and problems become more complex, it is just difficult for very small teams to solve those problems. The second one is the intersection between power and influence. And this is a little bit of a problem. Here, there's a lot of pressure from the top. There's a desire to do things. There's the upper management says we need to solve this problem. People are there ready to make decisions. There's a lot of chatter in the organization about the issues. Maybe even they have suggestions, but really they don't have the ability to solve the problem because they don't have expertise. What this environment creates is quite a bit of chaos because there is a pull from a push from upper management, but no ability to actually solve, even though the organization wants to solve the problem. And same thing, you can bring it down to individual team level, same situation. If the team is not staffed with people with ability, it will churn and churn and churn and not come to the desired result. And the third one is even worse. Here, the team has ability and influence, but no authority. Essentially, what this means is that there is a buy-in from the organization of the problem and the solution. There is, because there are people there who have ability to solve, but there is nobody to make the decision. So it actually could happen. And when that happens, then there's a organizational dysfunction, organizational discontent increases. And this is one of the area that managers need to be quite cognizant of. This happens when there is a disconnect between senior management and the organization as such. And of course, the green spot right in the middle, this is a zone of high performance. This is where all three, power, ability, and influence come together. This is sweet spot. Here, things happen quickly, and this is like agility on a steroid, and teams are aligned that they deliver good results. So the responsibility of the management is to find ways to increase this green area through management structures or build a team that has all of these things together. So while building a team that has power, ability, and influence is a necessary condition to have a high performance team, it is not sufficient condition. It requires a lot more than just those three things that I said. To understand that, let's look at what are the characteristics of high performance teams. The first is that high performing teams have high mutual trust and respect. They embrace diversity. They have common belief in organizational mythology, and also known as mission. They can differentiate between confidence and competence, and they are wary of careerists. I put 5 points here. First 3 are directly related to the teams themselves, and number 4 and 5 are more important for the management team that is putting the team together. I'm going to go through each one of these over the next 5 slides to really expand on what we mean by each one of these 5 items. So first one is mutual trust and respect. This is probably the single most important factor determining whether a team is going to be high performance team or not. This one single factor is responsible whether the team is going to work together or turn into descent into a unproductive resource sink. So an organization, this is on a notion that any organization has a finite amount of energy that it can allocate to internal and external problems. So more energy that is consumed for internal processes in squabbles, less energy is left for the organization to serve customers and drive growth. Any successful organization always allocates resources between internal and external. Some of the internal investment, internal energy is highly productive because those are to improve processes. Those are to make internal operation much more efficient, and that is good investment in internal energy. But when that energy is spent in squabbles, that's wasted or frictional energy. One can say that success of an organization is a function of ratio between energy spent externally and energy spent internally. So when a team or an organization is built on mutual trust and respect, then team members, as I said, trust and respect each other's views. They reduce frictional energy. They listen actively to each other and create a self-learning team. They rely on each other to do their best, and they take joint ownership of ideas, decisions, and results. The next, number 2 on the list was diversity. In certain circles, the word diversity is a code word for preference for certain segments of society. That to me is an absurd notion, and I'll expand on that a little bit in this slide. Diversity is a powerful force multiplier for creativity and out-of-box problem solving. It is a reality that people with different races, genders, sexual orientation, ethnic background, economic status, age and cultural background, etc., they have their own unique experiences of life, and their life experiences are shaped by their unique circumstances. And diversity is about harnessing experiences that come from these different life experiences. As a matter of fact, this is also a acknowledgement that our customers are a diverse group, their experiences are different, and we need to take that into account as we come up with solutions for problems, come up with new products, new services, and be successful in offering our products and services to the larger population. It is, in fact, a insurance policy against blind spots that a homogeneous group does not even know exist. I thought that I would use this simple metaphor to describe diversity. Our hand is a great example of what I'm talking about here. It is made up of 5 digits and a palm. Each one of those 6 things have their own ability, but by themselves, they can't do much. But when put together, they can do amazing things. That probably is the best way to describe the power of diversity. Then next part here for diversity here is that uh, we as humans, we tend to love ourselves. By that, what I mean is that there's enough social research done that shows that executives and managers tend to want to replicate themselves. We love people that are like ourselves, and that creates a big risk of building blind spots. And those blind spots can be then addressed if we consciously work on diversity. Interestingly, the things that make entrepreneurs or senior executives very successful is the very thing that also makes them more susceptible to this human nature of being in love with oneself and trying to find people that are like themselves. And when we combine the diversity with mutual trust and respect, together these two are a powerful force for high performance. Third line item we had here was organizational mythology, also known as mission. It's a common purpose that everybody can believe in and is ready to rally around. Throughout our human history, we know that we have seen that our social structures and tribes and countries and religions are all based on certain sets of mythologies that these groups believe in. And this sense of commonality gives them disproportionate courage and ability to fight through difficult circumstances. Thoughtful CEOs know this, and they create an environment and create a clear set of mission that entire organization can buy and rally around. So I'm going to use here just this slide to show you some very simple examples of well-known brands that when we think of those brands, what comes to our mind first? First one is Apple. When you see Apple logo, very quickly, everybody thinks of ease of use, sleek design. Their internal motto is think smart. But this is also an example where mythology can change over time. When Apple started in 1984 with a big bang advertisement during a Super Bowl commercial, at that time, the message was, we are going to change the world and all ways of doing things are no longer right, and we're going to free the users from big IT companies. And in that case, their target was IBM. Over time, they are measured on ease of use and sleek design. If you look at Google, their motto has been don't be evil, and behind that is we are good guys making lives easier for people. I have an asterisk in front of don't be evil because just recently Google had dropped that tagline, and we'll see how that goes in the long term. Throughout 20th century, IBM was the most technologically strong company in the world. Year after year, they were producing more patents, more Nobel Prize winners, and more complex equipment than anybody else on the planet. And there, the pride was of innovation and ability to solve problems. And their tagline was think. And interestingly, you can see it's very similar to what now Apple says, think smart. That looks like a little bit of a dig at IBM of old. Costco, a lot of us shop at Costco and people love it because of customer service and no questions asked policy. And Walmart, low prices every day, everywhere. The point here is that there are some simple credos that these organizations have created and many others, that entire organization believes in it, and that becomes their north pole for solving problems. Now, shifting into the last two of the five items we had on the list there. This is confidence versus competence. And here we have to refer back to our culture of lionizing self-belief and confidence as the magic ingredient of success. We have entire industry of self-help gurus. There are dozens and dozens of books written. Some people have even created entire organization talking about how self-belief is the primary driver of success or failure. And one of the very popular sayings here attributed to Henry Ford is, whether you think you can or you think you cannot, you are right. Essentially what it says is that everything is in your head, and if you have confidence, you will be successful. Now put that together with several studies, academic studies that have been done. Two of them have been quoted quite regularly, and one even has given a name to an entire effect. It's called Dunning-Kruger Effect. And this came out of the research done by Justin Kruger and David Dunning at Cornell University. And I'm doing disservice here by boiling it down into two sentences. But essentially what they found is that incompetent people tend to hold an overly favorable view of their competence relative to general population. So incompetent people think that they are much more competent than the general population. Conversely, highly competent people tend to rate themselves lower than the capability of general population, uh, meaning they are less confident than they should be about their capabilities. Similar results from a different angle was produced by Thomas Chamorro Premizik from University of London. And his work shows that confidence masks incompetence. So if you put all of these things together, there is a terrible risk for managers to really confuse confidence with competence, because culturally we like to deal with confident people. They're typically social. They give us a sense of comfort, but that creates an environment where it can blind managers to existence of equally or more competent people who are not as overtly confident. The reason I put this in here is that this is an important factor in selecting who is assigned what responsibility, and when a team is being put together, to think more deeply about individuals and their capabilities than just a superficial confident person who gets the assignment. And the last one here is beware of careerists. And careerists, these are another set of people in organization, mostly in large organization, that are they could be very competent people. They deliver results. Some don't, but many do. And they are like dopamine for senior management. And I say that because they are constantly validating ideas of higher ups without critical thinking. And who doesn't like people who validate your idea and make you feel that you have the best ideas out there? But they do not challenge your ideas. They will execute boss's idea, but will not make decisions better. And progress doesn't happen if the things are not being challenged and ideas are not being improved from their original state. They are mostly interested in advancing their own careers, and they manage up very well. So once again, I want to make sure that this doesn't mean that career, thinking of career is wrong or bad, but these are specific kind of people whose entire focus is career enhancement. And if one finds employees who are not willing to challenge and improve ideas, that is not advancing the organization further. And that is also a factor in picking who could contribute to a high performance team and who may not be the appropriate person for that particular job. So Well, let me just put all of these things together a little bit. So takeaways here are high performance teams need convergence of power, ability, and influence. And when I say influence, I mean organizational buy-in to form and flourish. Second is mutual trust and respect between team members is most foundational requirement for high performance teams to form. And we went over why that is so. Third is diversity is a force multiplier for quality of decisions. Fourth, the common purpose that everybody, a common purpose that everybody understands and believes in provides great clarity of purpose and action for the entire team. It gives them a bigger reason and ability to actually be more agile because they have clarity of what the big picture objective is. Fifth is leaders must take care to see through their blind spots when selecting people to staff teams. And this relates to the last two items in the previous two slides. And finally, becoming good at building high performance team is not an event. It is a culture change that needs to be embraced and lived by leaders of the organization. Now, looking at all this, it might seem like that this is a very long-term project that you cannot do anything in the short term to build a high-performance team. It's far from it. We know that culture change is a long-standing and a long-term transformation. Culture change is long-term transformation. It takes a lot of energy and work from management team. But there are specific things you can do right now to make your teams perform better. And here are a few of them. First one is make sure that the problem is clearly defined and there is an agreement in the team on the desired state. That is, they collectively defined what success looks like. And there are many techniques to go about doing it. But essentially, what you're trying to do is to create a discussion, an open discussion between team members to really paint what is the desired state that will make everybody feel that they have solved the problem that they're addressing. That kind of discussion helps teams identify impediments to get to that state, because now they're looking at things in the bigger picture versus something tiny, and that also helps them remove confusion between symptoms and problem. And that happens often. Often we see symptoms because they are flashing red lights in front of us. We attack that and leave the core problems behind. And this agreement between the team also builds common ownership of the solution and gives the team a positive goal to drive towards. Second thing one can do is create a zone of high performance for team. What this means is to staff the team with people with ability, authority, and influence, so team feels fully empowered. And finally, at least in the short term, you can kick off the team with guidance that one's organizational rank does not bestow extra weight to one's ideas. And this is quite important because often in these teams, unless the culture is such that people could open up and talk, people tend to look at the person with the highest rank. So the most senior person in the team has the responsibility to model this behavior and make sure that a safe environment is created for everybody. So 3 items: make sure that the problem is clearly defined and a team is thinking about desired state and looking at from the big picture and go from there to specific problem solving. Creating a zone of high performance, so staffing the team appropriately. And third, making sure that the hierarchy doesn't get in the way of free flow of ideas. So let me leave you with some additional resources. we are about 40 minutes into this presentation. So probably this is the right time to finish up. First three here, these resources are books. Uh, uh, Dr. Adizes is a management consultant, very charismatic one. He has written a lot of books and made videos, etc. Some of them are they're worth reading. The third book here is a very simple read. I read it recently. It's quite good. And then there are three articles. One of them in Wall Street Journal. It was published a couple of years ago. How bosses waste their employees' time. And then final two, a couple of articles I have posted on my LinkedIn. And when you read that, you'll see the commonality between this presentation and those articles. So with that, let me hand it back to Arun for opening up for questions and answers or any other comments.
So, Mish, thank you. Excellent talk, very thought-provoking. You've given a very helpful framework here to sort of think about this. Maybe could you elaborate with some of your personal anecdotes in terms of where you had to build a team, work through the cultural transformation within the organization, and some of the challenges and things you had to deal with? I think a specific example might be sort of illustrative to the audience.
Yeah, that's a great question. The one that jumps out at me is about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more, at a company called Vignette when I got there. The Vignette was one of the four leaders in web content management technology. And by the time I arrived there, the product was mature, and customers were moving at much faster rate than the company was able to keep up. And there was a lot of tension between product engineering, product management, support organization, implementation folks, services folks, and there was so much tension that communication had broken down. People in support organization were being crushed by customers because product was not doing things that they expected from newer products to do. So what I ended up doing is follow some of these advice that I'm now sharing with all of with this team. But all of the first thing was to figure out the influences. I spent some time with my own team to see what they thought. This was engineering team. And what they thought was the problem. And what I found is that they had the solution. They just didn't have any consensus of what to do, number one, or they didn't feel they had authority to do this because some of those things were disruptive and they needed some cover to make sure that they got enough time to fix these issues, because the tactical was always on top of them and they were never able to get things done. When I talked to services folks, they felt that engineers were all bums and they didn't know what the heck they were doing. And I needed to fire all of them and bring new people in. Sales folks were just pulling their hair out, saying that as long as these problems exist, I can't go in front of my customer to sell the next product. So I don't want new products, just fix the old ones. So what I ended up doing was to select a group of 10 to 12 people. And I made sure that my counterparts, all C-level folks, were in the room. We created an environment where people could talk about what the issues were. And we spent about a day or two, actually a full day, just almost like a catharsis of several years of issues. And first you see a lot of anger and pointed barbs at people. But once that was over, we said, okay, now let's talk about what is what state we want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, that will make us all together feel proud of our accomplishments. And we worked on that. Then we worked together, okay, on what specific steps we need to do. We worked on that. From that, we created a whole list of things that the team committed to doing together. And we also realized that this is too much. There's no way we can do all of this together. So we said, how about we pick from this what we call big rocks, And these big rocks, if we were to move it together, would make significant impact on the customers, our revenue, and so on and so forth. And we did that. The team got together. By that time, they were all in. They were all in because it's their idea, and there were decision makers in the room. And we ended up creating a task of a list of 6 to 7 items and put timelines on this and committed to actually coming back to the team and the rest of the organization. We all put all of us on notice that this is our commitment and we'll deliver that. And that was a transformative experience. So there are techniques available to do this thing, but one has to really commit to actually executing on that.
Just as a follow-up, when you did that, did you have to bring your counterparts, your other C-levels on board? If they didn't have the same terminology or knowledge, was there any pushbacks of any of those peers of yours who said, wait a minute,
No, great question. I mean, that was the first thing to do. I had to build a relationship with my counterparts. They knew that this was a big enough issue for everybody, and they were committed to at least giving it a try. They had never been through this before, but they did participate. And once they started to participate, they saw the level of exchange of ideas and passion that the team had. And it becomes quite infectious. It sucks you in. You become part of it and you own it. And it's a very different experience than when you are just sitting in the conference room or your office and responding to emails.
Let me just remind to the audience, so we are open for Q&A. You're please welcome to put any questions you might have for Somesh on chat. So while I wait for some other questions. So what about, I know we talked about earlier, even when my business starting that, the command and control approach versus team approach. And even though you might, be all bought into high performance teams, I'm sure there are times when there has to be more directive and command and control approach to solving a problem. Any sort of thought process behind when one is appropriate over others? So your own experiences?
Yeah, that's a great question, but a complex one to answer because the real answer is it depends. But let me explain, say a few things. Really, it depends on the size of the organization and the state in the organization it is. That's number one. And number two, of size and complexity of problem. Both of those are important. First, let's talk about the organizational state of the organization. When a company is small, then authority is very clear, but responsibility is not clear. By that, what I mean is that people are doing all kinds of things. As you are a technical manager, but you're also hiring, you're doing HR thing. The CEO is doing all kinds of different things, maybe even finance, maybe fundraising, all kinds of things. So this responsibility is not very clear, but authority is very clear. As the company starts to mature, the other extreme end is very large corporations, where responsibility is very clear. Everybody is in their box, but authority is not clear. You've got 100 people voting on it. You may not even know when your project got killed because somewhere, some division has objection to it and they threw monkey wrench in it and you don't even know it. So those are two extremes. In the first one, it's really command and control can work very, very well because small team, people know exactly what the problem is. They're already extending themselves to multiple things. So it's much easier. In big companies, command and control is very hard. They try often, and most of the time they fail whenever they try, unless it is a small problem where you know exactly who is the expert and who is responsible. So I think knowing clearly the ability and responsibility is probably the most important thing. And of course, the size of the organization.
Excellent. We're open for Q&A. If anyone of the audience have any questions, please feel free to send it on the chat. We might have a couple more minutes before we wrap this up. Any other closing thoughts, Somesh? I know you gave a chart on some of the takeaways and some of the reading materials. Is there one more preference of yours or others in terms of the reading material? If somebody were to say, if I have time to do one reading, what would that be on this topic?
You mean the book wise?
The book and the different materials you present in the last slide.
I think those articles are 2 pages long.
Okay.
So they are simple enough. And so one can read that. The third book on that list is also is relatively easy to read. It's easy to read, maybe a couple hundred pages. First two are lot more complex. It goes into all kinds of things. So they're a little bit harder to read.
The other request I'm getting, Sumesh, is could they get a copy of your slides? I mean, is that
yes. I will make it available. I'll also post it on my LinkedIn, probably. And we'll have it on Thai.
Yeah, we'll send it to Samia now.
Right. So we can do that.
Yeah, so those who need a copy, just send a request to Samia, and she'll be happy to send it. Good. But anything else? I'm looking at my screen.
I think somebody here saying, can they see the big corporation logo again, please?
Yeah, so that could be just our sponsors. I'm not sure when we will have that in a minute. So Samia, we're back to you. Is there a closing? You want to give us? I think we basically want to tell about some of the upcoming.
Yeah, they're just, Arun, sorry, there's a couple of questions in the chat. What's your advice to someone who wants to apply this framework? What does it take to become good, Sumesh?
Yeah, I think the last slide, let me pull it back here. I think that this is probably the best way to start, which is if you're starting doing this framework, I believe there must be some problem. Either it is problem or you're trying to build a strategy for your product or your team or your organization. I think bringing together, identifying key people who have skills and ability and who will be responsible for executing, who have insight, and those who have influence, bringing them together to really come up with the step number one, which is to clearly define what is it that we want to accomplish and what is the desired state that will make all of us or all of you collectively proud of accomplishment is probably the first thing. And once that is done, then unspooling that yarn, a ball of yarn, and try to figure out what are the various steps that you need to take internally. There are other resources available that makes it possible for folks to actually do some workshops to create this environment of trust and respect. But that is, I would recommend that exercise, but that takes more effort. And then it requires, like any good thing, it requires nurturing and really helping through over a period of time. And executives and leaders have to live and show that you actually buy into this and show it by your actions.
Thank you. So we're going to try to wrap this up. It's almost 4:55. So let me just share so again, first of all, let's thank Sumesh for an excellent talk, and it's a very thought-provoking. This is an area which we all deal with, whether we put it in that framework or not. We're all about trying to figure out how stuff get done through a diversity of teams. So once again, thank you, Sumesh. Our upcoming events, as you see on slide, on March 9th, very timely in terms of all of us in Texas just went through a couple of weeks ago, lessons learned and opportunities for the Texas Grid Breakdown. And this would be a Thai Texas sort of event. We'll have a participation from Thai Austin and Thai Dallas as well. And then on March 25th, put that on your calendar. Everything you wanted to know about franchising, but didn't know how to get started. We were also looking at not just, although Thai in legacy-wise has been mostly tech-centric, but we're looking from your mentoring and education about all sorts of businesses. So franchising, Could be on any area. So that's an interesting topic we should put on your calendar as well. So with that, I will wrap it up, and thank you again for all attending. Thanks, Sumesh, one more time. And we will look forward to seeing you all at the next event. And have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.